the next generation of leaders have to say? Hello and welcome to the Eternal Optimist Podcast. I'm Elvira, and in this first series, we will talk to some of the next-gen leaders within sports. Great stories, tips, tricks, and much more is what you will find here. We can't wait to hear what these amazing leaders have to say. So without further ado, let's begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Optimist Performance Podcast. We are here with Joshua Scott today, Head of Operations at Queen's Park Rangers. Thanks, Josh, for being here with us.
No, thanks for having me on.
He's got dressed up especially for the occasion. He's reassured us that all the gear, and he has every idea. So that is what's special. But we're exploring in our sort of series of podcasts the biggest challenges that the next generation and the new generation of leaders are facing. For you and in your experience at the moment within the football world and as head of operations at QPR, and what are you finding to be the biggest challenge that you're facing as a sort of future leader, next generation leader?
I think the common theme that I pick up with anyone of a similar age is around impostor syndrome and the fear that you don't have all of the experience that other people in leadership positions may have, and that for some reason makes you unqualified and that you haven't picked up on valuable things over time. And that's something we've learned from the Sport Industry NextGen program we're on, that everyone feels that way. But then when you talk to people that are 40, that are 50, 60, they still have imposter syndrome as well. So it's quite interesting that it's not something that tends to go away for a lot of people. People find no matter what position you put in, you always feel like you're a little bit in an unknown. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge from an age perspective. Certainly that sort of fear of, am I going to be found out on day one, or am I going to be found out by my peers that I don't actually know what I'm doing?
And how have you managed that?
It was only by actually speaking to a lot of other people that you did find it's a shared theme, and it's not something that you just feel, because you can sit there and build up a bigger picture in your head that it's really about me. I'm the person that's got the issue and I'm going to be found out. And the other way was just actually through saying, no, I've got into this position for a reason. You never really tend to be given a job without an actual reason or a purpose. Someone clearly thought that I was good enough to do this job. They put the faith in me to do that. And I think that was just also the secondary thought of, I wouldn't be given this responsibility. I've been at QPR for 5 years now. I was put into a leadership position 3 years after joining and after about 4 promotions at the club. So that wouldn't have happened unless people had that faith in me. So while I still day to day sometimes think I still don't know what I'm doing at times, you kind of just got to learn that everything is there's always going to be new challenges over the horizon. I could be doing this job for the next 20 years and there'll be something that comes up in that point that I still don't know.
And Josh, just on that final piece on the imposter syndrome, do you find that you sort of seek that experience? Is that for you, is that a positive experience as a leader, i.e. that feeling of being unsettled and maybe the imposter syndrome you're talking around? Do you try and operate at that level and get comfortable at that level, or do you sort of shy away from it and not seek it out?
No, me personally, I do seek it out. You like to be challenged. I think the fear of going into something and you don't know what's going to happen, or you don't quite know about having the skills, takes you to that next level. So whether it's a new project that you're working on, or meeting a new group of people, or going into a board presentation for the first time, you want that little kind of unsettled feeling, a bit of nervousness, because I think that's what drives you to sort of not just be stuck in a rut, not do the same things. And the only way I've ever learned is by seeking out those challenges.
One of the things that most people are talking about now is the challenge of finding the best talent and obviously keeping them as well. Have you experienced this at your current position? And what do you think leaders can do to attract and keep the best talent?
Yeah, I think it's twofold for me and QPR, if I can talk about QPR, because we're fortunate enough, certainly in my team, we haven't had resignations, we haven't had people leaving. And I think that's because of what steps the club took to look after its staff during the pandemic. So where we did furlough staff, we made sure we backed up with 100% pay. We actually took all pay cuts from senior leadership positions to make sure that the lowest paid staff kept their roles and kept their 100% pay. So being fortunate in that way, and I think that's a reflection more on the club than the industry. But industry-wise, you look at a match day, for example, we have hundreds of staff working on a match day, and there has been a big loss of staff, people not want to come back. And working in casual environments. They've found roles that they can work from home instead of having to stand on their feet for 7-8 hours a day. So that's been a big challenge for us. One that's still unanswered. I think every football, every rugby, every cricket club across the country is suffering with those issues. So I think retaining talent, it comes from the top. And while I may be a leader, it does need to come from the CEO. It does need to come from the board. I think when you have that message going right the way through the company, it sets the tone. But I think otherwise, what I felt that I could do was just kind of keep contact with the team and constant discussion, whether it's through that lockdown or whether it's when they're coming back to work, and just engage with the team. I like to think quite personable. So I think being able to give your team trust to do their work and set the right environment. I think those are when I think back to when I was working under a leader, what did I want? And it's just kind of looking at what did I want and trying to replicate that environment.
Josh, I just in terms of finding that right talent, how have you gone about building a strategy or actually sort of really understanding like who you want, what you need, and how you're going after it, like the actual if you like, talent ID process, and then as Elvira said, then the retention, because good people are sought after all over the place. So how do you actually make sure you keep hold of them as well?
So on the talent ID side, it's tricky. Working in football is a little bit interesting actually, because people tend to want to work in football without you sometimes needing to go out there and necessarily sort of headhunt as hard as other industries may have to do. So being a football club is great. People are almost attracted to your brand before you even have to go out there. But actually, there's been 1 or 2 talks I've been to recently actually about finding the right talent, and it's also about finding people that will benefit the department. I think what I've done previously is find people that I think are a little bit similar to me, and I've learned that's not always the right method. You want to find people that have different skill sets and challenge your ideas rather than just being kind of the same mold. So I think that's one I've learned over the past few years, of just kind of where are my skills, and not just I need to hire a certain role, but what sort of characteristics do I need to find in a person? And actually it's looking past, as people have done with me, it's looking past experience. You may not have 10 years experience in this role, but you've clearly got certain skill sets that I want in my team, and I think that's what I look for in talent ID. But as you said about retaining that, I think it's for younger people, I think it's about being empowered and given the opportunity to do things. So it's giving my team the opportunity to do things and not just be part of the cog, actually feel like they're wanted and that they have a role. And it's also about development, so making sure that people have the opportunities to take on leadership experiences, be in leadership, roles, or give them, times that they can be a leader, and just training them. Where do they want to go? Where do they want to develop? Throughout my career to date, that's what I've always looked for in a leader. So it's again replicating that experience.
And Josh, how do you, just one thing you mentioned there around your own sort of personal biases and personal preferences of like maybe hiring people that aren't necessarily in your mold. Is any sort of tips or tricks that you've done, or people that you surround yourself with to, if you like, provide that challenge or provide the different perspective that makes you go, well, actually, maybe I wasn't going to pick that person, but I'm going to now. That's the one we're going with because, I don't know, he, she, or this input has helped develop me and my perspective.
I think, as I touched on, it was, you may have a set job description for a role. And previously and years ago, you'd look for someone with experiences in those roles without sometimes focusing on the personal characteristics, whereas I tried to delve a little bit more into their personal characteristics, what sort of, for me, I'm very analytical, very methodical. So I need creativity, for example. So, while someone who sits there and tells me they love a spreadsheet as much as I do sounds great to me, is someone that turns around and says, actually, what I need to do this, I need to be creative, I need to have this many things on the go. It was trying to push, when I'm looking at future recruitment as well, it's trying to push down those paths. Okay, there's no point hiring 4 people the same as me. We will end up doing the same thing, the same tasks, and seeing things the same way. So I think it's just kind of taking a step back. There are various tools out there for looking at what your sort of personality traits are and your skill sets, and they all have pros and cons, but it's kind of taking a step back and seeing where are your personality skills, what do you need to fit into the puzzle, and what are you missing in your team.
So building on that, I guess, around talent ID and what the future needs and what people need, talent need, etc. Obviously, the big buzzword is the hybrid working model at the moment and flexible working. Yeah. How are you finding that as a leader of operations within a big football club, and the need or the lack of need for hybrid working, depending on what the demand is for you at the moment and for your team?
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Being able to work from home has been a dream, and it's not one people in operations probably ever thought they'd have. Operations, when you get down to the crux of it, it's the match day operations, the stewarding, the medical, but also the day-to-day maintenance, the cleaning. All of these tasks require people on site. So there is a lot of on-site working, but there's never really been an option for us to take a day or take 2 days from home and focus on tasks that you can do at home. So that's been a great addition to our sort of working environment. And I think that's going to be something people like myself want going forward. You don't need to be there 5 days a week. I don't need to be on site to check what cleaning and maintenance are doing, because you have that trust in people that they will do the tasks without you being there every day. Whereas traditionally, I think operations, it was always, you need to see the leader there, because otherwise things will go to pot, and it's not been that case. So I've definitely benefited from it, and being able to focus on different tasks at different times and use my time sort of more wisely.
One thing we've seen a bit of in the market, maybe not in the sports market per se, but has been the suggestion that the hybrid model delays progression, development opportunities, promotion opportunities for people, because you're not in and amongst people rubbing shoulders, learning from seniority and whatever else. Are you a buyer of that, or are you sort of in the other camp of, I think it's, as you said, it's a great thing and it should be here to stay kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that. I think that's where the hybrid model is important. It's not a completely remote model. Some businesses will work on a remote model. Football, sport won't, because we operate on match days. We have fans coming in. You do need to be there. So there are certainly truths to, you're not constantly next to someone, but that doesn't mean you still can't be empowering people, giving them responsibilities, or actually, thanks to the development of hybrid working and things like Teams, we've been able to explore learning opportunities that are more cost effective and can enable more people to undertake qualifications. So an example is, there's a qualification a few of my team and myself are doing that traditionally would have been done in person and cost about 4 times as much. Now, because Teams and Zoom is so much more used, companies are taking advantage of that, and actually it's given us more educational opportunities thanks to using Teams. There is some things to say about mentoring and being in person, which is harder to do via distance, but as long as you have that hybrid model, as long as there is some in person with some at home, that's the best way for me.
Have you developed a bit of a rule around it at all out of interest, like 2 days in, 3 days home, or whatever? Or
no, as a club we haven't, and I think that's down to every department has different preferences. If you're the finance or HR team, you have different requirements, whereas operations and press, for example, need to be on different days. So we felt like trying to pigeonhole people into just 2 or 3 days would not really be the best solution for us. So we've been quite free with it. We find that everyone still communicates quite well. We still bring teams together for a weekly meeting or before match days, so people are still getting that exposure to every department. And again, similar for my team, I don't want them to feel like they have to be set in certain ways, because some of the advantages of hybrid working are you might need to be at home on a certain day, and that was frowned before, so you took a day off. Now you can wait for a delivery guy or someone who's installing something at your house, go into the dentist and do your work for the rest of the day. So we haven't set any hard rules, because again, I think it's about that trust in people doing the right thing. And I know that my department will come in on the days they need to be in and work from home when they need to work from home.
Brilliant, I love it.
So what do you think are the most important skills for the new leaders?
I think some of the skills haven't changed, because I would always say, organization is one of the key skills, and keeping, for me, is moving to head of department was much more strategy focused and making sure that responsibilities were shared out, and I don't think that's changed. Communication is definitely changed, because I noticed there were times that I went 2 days without talking to someone when previously I'd have sat next to them for 8 hours. So it's actually about constantly checking in, and not from a point of what are you doing, but how are you, and how checking if things are right, and just having that natural catch up that you didn't have before. So communication, of course, has always been the big one. It's now about a different method of communication. If someone is working from home for a few days, just the check in and how are things, and casual chat is definitely changed.
I've been listening to some of your interviews, and I know you mentioned that you did all the processes and everything during lockdown, new strategies, new processes and everything. My question is, do you think that creating everything new help you be more able to adapt, or be able to adapt more effectively?
Yes, it was an interesting timing actually. So I took over as the head of department in February 2020, and of course COVID hit in March 2020. And the first few months I'd identified, okay, I want to get to grips with this, I want to learn that. So I've been at QPR for 3.5 years, 3 years at that time. So I understood processes, but never from the head department role. And suddenly, rather than learning them and taking time, I was ripping them up and writing new processes. So actually, there's obviously a lot of negatives to what happens, but from an operational perspective, I was able to sort of really fine-tune the processes, make them my own, create new processes, and who's going to better understand those processes than me? So all of a sudden, the match day operations that largely stayed the same, just tweaked every year or two over decades, were rewritten by me, and I had to then take a lead. So adaptability, I now say everyone, the big change is everyone knows how to be flexible, because the government may come out with something one week and the next week it's something different. And I think before there was a lot of barriers to change in sport and how match days and stadiums were run. Now everyone's in a much more flexible position. Everyone's quite open to change, different ways of working. So while it was, a big challenge, it was actually almost good in timing for me personally.
And from that, from a behavioural perspective, how much of that is nature and how much of that is nurture? Any sort of tips or tricks as to how you develop that over time, or were you just naturally that inquisitive?
No, I think you do learn it over time, and that's where being in the operations mindset for me, so working in the operations world was key. I did a business and finance degree at university. It's very black and white. It's very number focused, and these are processes. But operations every day is different. There's no set answer at times. So working in that world for a few years at QPR and in different industries before that, constantly led to, okay, there's different ways of working. There's going to have to be different ideas. But it's also, without stereotyping people, I think younger people as well, when we talk about young leaders, we always like to think that we know different ways of working and all these great ideas, and we've never been listened to. So that's the other part. I think it was match day processes, and I'm not saying every football club is the same, but match day processes at a lot of stadia have stayed the same way for a longer years. And there'd be many other people my age who go, I do this, this and this differently. And it was just an opportunity to put those things into practice. But in terms of how you do it, I guess that's a hard one to answer, because I probably am a little bit like that nature-wise, but otherwise, in terms of learning and development, it's just been the process of the world I work in, and it's just being open to different ways of working and different ideas.
Nice, I like it.
My next question is, what personal experience do you think have had a bigger impact on the leader that you have become?
So I think prior to becoming a head of department, it was about people. I had two fantastic leaders in my experience to sort of becoming the leadership position I was in. One was right at the start of the career I had, who pushed me to do more, and even actually pushed me to leave the role and join QPR. He thought that I could do much bigger and better things, and wasn't afraid to lose someone that he obviously valued in his team, for me to benefit myself. And that was quite eye-opening, someone that actually really took my development and what I wanted to do rather than his own work-life balance, because when I left, of course, he was going to have to replace and do all the things you have to do. So I think that was quite eye-opening, and someone to really push me to do things. And then a similar experience when I became head of department here, there was someone that came in who completely operated on a people-based focus. And previously, sometimes you can feel selfish. You want to develop yourself. You want to get the best qualifications. You want to get the promotions. And it was having someone again that sort of took everyone in our team. Where did they want to go? What did they want to do? How can I support you? That got me into this position and gave me the backing to get into this position. So I think the people, and I've been very fortunate, obviously, to have those people to date. I think that's made the biggest difference to becoming a leader.
How would you define your leadership style?
I'm going to almost say laid back, which is not a good thing sometimes. I always look at it from how did I want to be managed, and I always wanted to be managed in a sense of, I think I've got good ideas, I think I know how to do things, let me run at them, but be there for support and check in and let me bounce ideas off you. Don't leave me isolated, but let me take the lead on things. So that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to give everyone in the department responsibilities, and rather than having to be CC'd into every email or sit in every meeting, run with things, take it on yourself. But I'm here to support you in that process. I'm here to bounce ideas off. So it's just kind of letting people run with it and checking in. And I think that's what's worked well for me, not having a bit of micromanagement of someone sitting on your shoulder, but having that support instead. That's the sort of ethos I try to lead by.
You mentioned those two people that influenced you and encouraged you, and how much does that now play into your own leadership style now? Like how much has that shaped how you lead? Are you replicating some of that stuff?
Yeah, when I've done appraisals with teams, I constantly talk to staff to say almost, where do you want, not where do you want to be in the club in 5 years? I'd love for you to be here, but what are you identifying out in the markets? One of my first jobs was in recruitment. And I know the best time to look for a job is almost when you're not looking for a job. So I said to them, look out in the market. I'm not saying look at other jobs, but what skill sets are people asking for? What do we need to develop you into? But if you work with someone and over a number of years that they improve themselves to be in such a position another business wants them, that's an absolute win. I think the role of a leader is getting people to the point of where they can either be the leader or they go off to be the leader somewhere else. So I think really that's having those people that did it for me has shaped how I act in the same manner. Hopefully you get a few years out of someone, hopefully you get more years, but if someone leaves and has done a fantastic job, I'm going to sit there and write them the best reference in the world, because that's what I now as a head of department think that my role is to get people into those positions that I was in.
And then from your own personal perspective, and if you were to sort of reflect on your leadership style or leadership experience, how do you identify what good looks like, basically?
Well, I think it follows on from the last question. If members of my team that I feel that I've started to build up, if members of my team go on to be leadership positions, then I think that's one tick box. And hopefully people hopefully don't leave, because then I've got a great team that stays with me. But I think one or two people are in a mindset that they want to do bigger and better things, which is great, because obviously that's the mindset I've always had. So if people go on to do bigger and better things, that's one tick for me. There are certain projects at the club that are going on that I get to be involved with. We're building a brand new training ground. So there's physical objects that I can see, that there's a new training ground built, big influence on that. But also it's kind of looking at the ways of working. So if people haven't left, has their skill set improved? Members of my team got qualifications. Have they got new skills? Are they more confident? We're quite a young team, and people in our world have tended to be on the older side slightly. So I think all of us sort of admit that we don't have the experience, we've got the ideas, but can we develop skill sets now and improve as staff over years? So if they don't leave, where have they progressed to? But back to that point of head of department, leader, it's no longer about, some of it's about where I am, but it's also about the team, where are they going? And I think, sort of repeat myself, but the role for me is to get people there now.
How do you manage, from your own personal perspective, that process of, like, I know this person's really good, and in 2 years' time that they should really be leaving to go on to senior roles? Just how do you balance that? Because I think lots of people must experience that, and they probably go on the other side, which is I need to protect them, I want to keep them here forever, and I don't want to let them go.
Yeah, well, I think you've got three strands there. One is that you continue to champion that person, and football is at times a niche industry, so other people, and if things came up and they said they're interested, I would be championing those people to those hiring managers to say this is a really good person, because that's what my role is, to get those people into leadership positions. But you can look at trying to retain people, because other roles may come up, but use another old adage, the grass is not always greener. So what are they getting from QPR? Are they getting development? Are they getting pride in their work? Do they feeling included in things, and do they not want to leave? So that's hopefully another position we reach. They might have all the ambitions in the world, but you've created such a good environment that they don't want to leave. So that's another, obviously, tick from our side. But with a sensible operational hat on, it's about contingency planning. As my past boss always told me, you can't just go along thinking that people will do the same things for years, even if they are the most wonderful staff in the world. I might win the lottery tomorrow, and I'm probably not, if I win £50 million, I'm probably not going to turn up to do a 9 to 5 anymore. So it's always about contingency planning, making sure that you are robust enough that if someone great leaves, fantastic. but you're not left, scrambling around trying to find how you replace that person. You've already got processes in place to what you need to do as next steps.
I mean, you heard it here, everyone. QPR, don't let Josh go and buy a lottery ticket. Or he's gone. He's gone. If he buys that lottery ticket, he's gone.
What goals have you set for yourself now?
Personally, I truly am honoured that I made it into a leadership position at the age I am. I didn't think, everyone I think has ideas in their heads of where you want to be. I joined the club in sort of almost the most junior position in operations department 5 years ago. I'm now the most senior person, and that's taken a number of steps. So when I first joined, it was sort of thinking 5 years time, I hope I'm somewhere in the middle, and very fortunate to get to the top. So I now also try not to think of too defined terms of X, Y, Z, where I'm going to be, what role I'm going to be. But ultimately, I would want to keep improving, building up, and my viewpoint has always been I want things in a certain way, I want to operate in a certain way, and I want certain environments, and the only way you can do that is to be a CEO. So I think that's the ultimate goal, being at the top of an organization so that I can actually truly impact change, because it does come from the top down. So ultimate goal is to hit that position, but otherwise it's sort of smaller goals of personal development, skill sets that I need to improve on. I think, as Ollie and I touched on earlier, it's challenging yourself. There's certain things that I've gone to, certain things that I've volunteered for, situations that don't feel comfortable, using skills that don't feel comfortable, and trying to bring out different skills.
Josh, have you got, just have interest on goal setting, have you got like a process or structure or a golden rule or anything like that you've got with how you sort of build your goals out, and how you sort of break, if the ultimate goal is the CEO, like how do you build towards that?
Yeah, that's where I now try to be a bit more flexible and open, because 5 years ago I thought, well, I'll do this, I'll be in this position and I could do this, and things change, and so many things on a personal level or work level change that I think it's too hard to be very specific. So while that's an ultimate goal, I don't want to set myself timeframes and then feel like I've failed or haven't hit certain points because I haven't met them in certain timeframes. So that's why I think I've shifted the focus to the golden rule, almost, expect the unexpected. Don't now just think this is where I want to be, because something totally different could come up, or different things at QPR come up. There's too many factors now, I think, to really sort of actually say this is where I'm going to be in 5 years' time. But for me, it's about, it's just about the person. The golden rule is just about the personal development. I think you don't become a successful leader until you go outside the comfort zone. And there's a few things that I've tried to do that do challenge that, and not saying make you a better person, but make you a more rounded person. And I think that's the ultimate challenge.
And within that goal setting, and so how do you deal with disappointment?
Yes, that can be a big step back at times. I think that's just part of almost being human. You can't go through life and work thinking that everything is going to be a success. There are going to be times that it's a step back, and people don't respond in the way you don't respond, or things don't go the way you think they were going to go. I'm quite analytical, so I also can, I can get quite emotionally invested in things. So I take it almost too personally at times if something's gone wrong, but it's about taking that step back. And a former manager was very good at sort of teaching me these things, taking a step back and actually remembering that people look to you, because whereas I kind of feel a bit too personal involvement and disappointment, or not so, may show on my face, and 5 years ago I'd have reacted differently and much more vocally and much more openly. It's about actually people look to me now to sort of see how I'm reacting, and that sets the tone. So what I can't do is rant and rave with the team nearby, or show that I'm upset or disappointed in actions. It's taking a step back, thinking, people now look to how I'm going to act, how am I going to lead the team through this challenge or this disappointment, then taking a bit of time back. How are you going to solve this problem? Disappointment happens, failures happen. It's about now, what are we going to do to address it or change it for the future?
I love that.
My last question is, what advice would you give to the next generation of leaders? The person that is now in the position that you were 5 years ago?
Buy that lottery ticket.
Just keep doing the lottery every week by the sounds of it. I think challenging leaders is a big part. I've heard one or two leaders through this course talk about, that younger leaders are much more vocal and much more open about challenging leaders. And it's funny, being in a leadership position, I'd almost relish being challenged on things from my team, because it shows that you're thinking about things outside the box. You're not too afraid to stand up. So I think being able to sort of stand up and challenge ideas is a big piece. But something I wish I had done a long time ago is reaching out to people and almost asking for mentoring. I've had that since I've got into a leadership position. I've had, even students just reaching out, can I have half an hour to chat about career path, or how did you get into this position? I don't think there are many people in the world who say no. They might say, I'm sorry, I haven't got time, but I don't think many people would turn around and say, no, I don't want to mentor you, or I don't want to give you half-hour time, or here's how I did this and this. And if I'd have done that 5 years ago, it was the fear of reaching out to people and someone saying no that stopped me from doing that. But now you actually discover, if I'm not saying no to people, surely there are CEOs and leaders that must be out there who wouldn't say no to me. So I think that's actually something I've learned over the past few months that I'm now trying to do, and reach out to people and ask for that sort of mentoring.
I love it. I think that's such great advice as well. Just reaching out to your point of keep developing, keep learning, keep exploring different avenues, and ultimately drawing on other people's experiences to further your own position and whatever else. Sharing is caring, as they say, but in a different capacity. So yeah. I mean, look, Josh, thanks ever so much. I think that was
great.
No, it's been really interesting, a great sort of conversation. I think it's brilliant to hear from not only yourself, but the stuff that's going on within your arena, the progress that's being made at QPR, and more broadly, how you handled and managed the challenges that the next generation or the new generation of leaders are facing, and what they sort of thinking. And I think it'll relate with a lot of people. It'll resonate with a lot of people. So from me and Elvira and everyone at Optimist Performance, thanks, mate. I really appreciate it.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Top man.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you have enjoyed the episode, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. We would love to know your thoughts. So please leave a question, comment, or suggestion in the comment section below. Thank you again, and see you next time.